Hello and welcome to this episode of the Game Plan Podcast by College Baseball Advisors. I'm your host, Wayne Mazzoni. My background is 30 years as a college baseball coach and current college baseball recruiting advisor. For more information about what I do, please visit collegebaseballadvisor.com. On today's episode, we had Matt Burdette, who's in his 29th year as the head baseball coach at Kenyon College in Ohio. What an awesome guy. 2 seconds into the podcast, you realize that this is just a gentle, good-natured guy who's doing right for kids. Great baseball coach. I've known him many years. Basically met at Head First showcase camp on Long Island and stayed in touch, and now communicate with him all the time in my recruiting business. So we covered a lot of stuff about Kenyon, about the D3 model, a little bit about the transfer portal, his coaching style. I think it was really informative to learn, obviously, about Kenyon, to learn about D3 baseball, to how he goes about his recruiting process and coaching. And it was a really enjoyable podcast. I think you'll get a lot out of. I'd like to remind you that this podcast is made possible through the generous sponsorship of the Mohegan Sun Baseball Coaches Convention. The World Baseball Coaches Convention takes place every year at Mohegan Sun. This year is January 15th to 17th, 2026 at the Mohegan Sun Casino in Connecticut. An excellent venue, an awesome event of lectures, big lectures, breakout room lectures, live ones in the batting cage and on the turf field. There's vendors. There's really opportunities to interact with coaches social, a lot of informal conversations about baseball. It's just a great event to really recharge your batteries at this great venue. So for more information about what they do, please visit baseballcoachesclinic.com. And without further delay, here's my conversation with Matt Burdette, head baseball coach at Kenyon College. Awesome. Matt, first of all, psyched to have you here. I mean, you and I have traded many a text over the time. We've also met several times out at Baseball Heaven, and you do a great job. Of course, we know Coach Kavanaugh together, which yes, we may talk about in this podcast too. But what I do when I do this, I do some research, but I try not to do so much research that I know every answer. On your bio at Kenyon, it talks about a lot of stuff, but it doesn't talk about where you were born and raised. So can you tell me where you were born and raised?
Sure. Yeah, I'm born in a town called 𝐾𝐿 Falls, Ohio, which is a suburb of Akron. So born and raised there, and again, have been an Ohioan pretty much my whole life. So homebred, hometown, definitely Browns, Guardians, Cavs, the whole nine. So I'm Ohio through and through.
So how far is where you grew up from where Kenyon is?
So it's about, I'd say it's a little over 2 hours southwest. So I went to college at the College of Worcester, which was about an hour southwest of where I grew up. And then I went another hour further south to Kenyon. Have pretty much been there, for the duration.
And then maybe on another podcast, we'll talk about which guy has it worse, you as a Browns fan or me as a Jets fan.
Wow. That we have to unpack a lot there.
There's a lot, and it's funny, on a kind of a side note, a guy, I went to Gettysburg, and a guy that one of my best friends from college is a longtime high school coach, and through a kind of, again, long story short, he's become friends with Kevin Stefanski, the head coach. Sure. Who seems like the coolest, nicest, most down-to-earth guy in the world, but it's tough to get that ship running in the right direction over there,
Yeah, you're not kidding. It's been a few years.
Yes, exactly. From an athletic standpoint, obviously, almost everyone I talk to here is a baseball person. I'm going to assume baseball was a huge part of your childhood. Was other sports a big part of you growing up?
Yeah, I mean, they were all a big part. Like the local, whoever was around locally in our age group, we were playing basketball and football and baseball and you name it. But I gravitated to basketball and baseball were the big ones. And then, obviously when it was all said and done, baseball was the sort of the true love that I continued to go with. But yeah, I mean, it was a great time to grow up. You just show up at the park and there are a bunch of people there and you do whatever season it was, you kind of did whatever it was called for. So yeah, it was great. But yeah, baseball for sure early on started to take a pretty good hold of what I wanted to do.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I kind of laugh at this, but you'll get it. I like interviewing the guys with a little gray in the beard
Yeah, there you go.
because we grew up in the same era. And a lot of these kids that I'll do some private lessons with or recruiting, I'm always telling them, dude, you don't need a team. You don't need the coaches. You don't even have to have a lesson. Like, get two buddies and go to the
Yep.
field and hit each other ground balls or fly balls or throw BP to each other. Like this, there's a little old school that I guess some of the grinders still have, but it's a little
Yep.
bit of a lost art where kids are
Yep.
kind of just go to the park on their own.
Wayne, it's funny you mentioned that. We were just talking the other day in the batting cage where I was watching some of our guys throw batting practice to each other, and it was atrocious.
Atrocious.
So
Incredible.
I jumped in. And I said, "You guys, let me do this." And I was throwing, batting practice. I said, "You guys this is how we had to survive in order to hit. Like we didn't have someone waiting in the wings to front toss or throw BP. We had to learn how to do it to each other." And that's kind of how it is. So I think generational, and back in the day, that was just how it was done. Now, and I get it, it's completely fine, but there are guys waiting, and paying an hourly rate to have someone throw batting practice to them. Which,
Right.
Hey, more power to everybody. That's
Yeah,
fine.
yeah. And it's funny, I even think, and it happens very rarely, I think for a pitcher, a developing pitcher to truly learn to upgrade your command, actually throwing some batting practice is a heck of
Yep.
a way to figure out a little pitchability. But a lot of them cannot do it.
No, no, and that's just something. Again, I think when you put that L screen in front of them and they're trying to throw batting practice or things like that, there's a lot of variables that go into it. But I do think you're right. It's an invaluable tool to be able to just kind of throw it where you want to, so that the guy can get his swings in. Um,
Exactly.
and
Yes.
that can be a very valuable tool when you got to throw a strike at some point during a game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I remember from my days of coaching and throwing a lot of batting practice. Obviously, you need to throw a strike to be a proficient coach to throw a batting practice. But
Right.
if you're working with a guy and he's like, "Coach, can you pound me inside because I got to work on the inside pitch?" If you're a coach that can't throw it in there, well, you're not really doing your job. So, like,
No, no question.
yeah, and it would be good for pitchers to be able to learn that repeated ability to command it. But um,
Absolutely.
back to you obviously said College of Worcester. Of course, again, you and I in the same age bracket. Recruiting was as night and day as it ever could be compared to now. What do you remember about what got you to the College of Worcester?
Yeah, interestingly enough, I verbally committed to a Big Ten school,
Mm,
and there was a coaching change, and I started to hear words I'd never heard before, like red shirt and things like that. And I knew that probably my baseball playing career was going to be over after college, so I wanted to play as much as I could. And I will tell you, I kind of fell sort of backwards into the Worcester situation. It was just about 45 minutes or an hour from my hometown. But Division III baseball in 1987, you just didn't know much about it.
no,
You just heard about Ohio State or Kent State or all the Division 1s that were in Ohio, and the Big Ten and those kind of conferences. So if you were a proficient baseball player, your mind was sort of on those. And then when it fell through, I sort of was like, oh my gosh, am I gonna play baseball? Um, I felt like I was good enough to, but there was a family friend who said, "Hey, you should look at this College of Worcester. They're really good at baseball, and I think you could be a good fit." And to be honest with you, it just sort of happened really, really quickly, and so the College of Worcester was a school that really wasn't on my radar. But it was academically a great fit. Baseball wise, it was proficient, and I got to play a lot of baseball there. So it ended up being the best decision that ever happened to me.
and back to though that first part where you committed to the other school before the coaching change. How did that come about? Because there weren't showcase camps, it wasn't
No,
Twitter. Like, do you remember how that
yeah,
connection happened?
I think I was really fortunate that I played on one of the best travel teams. So some kids did get seen.
Right,
And I just happened to be on one of those really good teams that had a lot of other people that people were looking at.
right,
And by default, I got looked at as well because I was there.
right.
And then, it started to snowball a little bit, and it looked like I was going to be, a Division I Big Ten player. And ultimately, I don't know that that was the goal, but that was all I knew.
Right, right.
So, fortunately for me, I found a completely new horizon out there with other schools,
Yeah.
with Division III academic schools, which had led me to what I'm doing today.
So perfect timing on that. You're at College of Worcester. I know you had a successful playing career during college. Because I'll say this personally for me, I never thought I would coach when I was a player in college. And then I get out and I go, man, a lot of jobs sound really boring. Let me try coaching.
Right.
I don't know how did you get into? Did you know all along, or what sparked it?
No, I didn't know. I was very fortunate to be coached by Hall of Famers at just about every stop. So there's a good to that. I learned a lot of really good baseball. But the other piece is like, I was like, wow, can I even do this at that level? Like these
Right.
guys are really, really good. I went to graduate school to be an athletic administrator. I kind of knew I
Interesting.
wanted to be in athletics. I just didn't know exactly how that would manifest itself, as I got older. I thought athletic director, college, some sort of administrator along those lines. I was always a college athletics fan, no matter
Got
what the
it.
sport was.
Interesting.
So no matter what it was something I wanted to do. So when I got the GA position at Kent State and finished there, I did an internship at Kenyon. And so right before I was finished with college, I had to do an internship. So I did a semester, or a year long, I should say, um, internship with Kenyon. And then I went back to finish up schooling. And I was like, that's I was coaching. I was an assistant AD or assistant to the AD. Was doing a lot of the ticket taking and a lot of the scheduling and all the stuff that comes with it. I was like, yeah, this is certainly what I want to do. And then the coaching opportunity full time came up, and it just took a hold. And I ran with it.
So after you get your degree at your master's,
Yep.
what was your first job? Was your first job coaching at Kenyon?
My first job was, yeah, as a matter of fact, it was I was an assistant coach at Kenyon. So I count that one. Then I left because there was zero money in it at the time. So I was like,
Right.
I don't know how to pay the rent and do all of that stuff just yet. So I went and got another job outside of the business for about 6 months, and then I was like, I begged to get back in. I'd much rather be poor than bored.
Yeah.
So I just felt like I'll figure this whole thing out with the money. But I could never figure out the fact that waking up to go into that other job just was miserable.
Yeah, that
So
is a
that's
very
kind of
much
how I went there.
yeah, that's a very much repeated thing that comes up on here. Like there's a good amount of people that did that only to come back to coaching because they realized the other jobs really weren't cutting it. But when you came back from that job, did you come back to Kenyon?
I did. I did. Fortunately for me, I had some other opportunities, but that was a comfortable one because I'd already been there.
Yep.
And through a couple different occurrences, I was able to get on full time and start the trek on what I'm doing today.
So you were at that point you were a full-time assistant?
I was
Okay.
came in there, and then our athletic director was the head baseball coach, so I worked
Ah,
with him really closely. And what I had heard all of these years later is his plan all along was to bring me back and for him to retire, and that I would be the successor. He said he saw a lot of good things when I did my internship there, so I was very fortunate to him. I'm very thankful to him that he saw something, and the transition was easy in the sense that I got the job, but that was just the beginning. The hard part was just now starting.
well, that's what I
You
was going to say.
know?
One thing you mentioned there, which is showing, the times changed. There, I don't think anywhere in the United States, maybe a junior college, there's no more ADs that are coaching anymore,
No,
right? Yeah, yeah.
no.
So forget
And
that.
that
But
was something that was kind of, that was something that I thought I could do because
right,
it was so prevalent. I was like, yeah, I can be in administration. I can be a coach. I really didn't know what it took to be either one of them at the time.
Understand. Yeah.
But I was naive enough to think I could do both. But ultimately, I never had to. And you see, that's a dying breed that doesn't even exist anymore.
Yeah. So as you're now full-time coaching and then take over, what do you remember as harder to learn, if you will? Was it, hey, I got to run a baseball program, like you're still a young coach, I got to X's and O's, how do I run practice, etc.? Or was it more of, all right, now I also have to administrate this program and do all those things? Was it both equally difficult, or do you remember back to like one of them being more difficult than the other?
This is when the Hall of Fame coaches that I had really helped. The baseball felt somewhat easy. The hitting fungos, the throwing, batting practice, that kind of stuff. The X's and O's, just because I had a wealth of sort of not knowledge, but I had knowledge at my disposal. I could go, ask the questions. The toughest part was I had no idea how the games got scheduled. I had no idea how the buses, showed up.
Right.
As a player, it just happens.
Just
the coach
happened. Yep.
tells you, hey, we're going to take batting practice at 9:30 or we got a road trip and the bus will be here. We need to be on the bus by 9 a.m. I was like, okay, that must be easy. It's really not as easy as it seems when you're 24 years old and you're like, I think we should have a game coming up and I don't have one on the schedule.
Right.
So yeah, I think the administrative part and all the other things that go with administrating, there's now 25 to 30 players and their families, and there's a lot of communication and information that is shared, that when you're just one family, you only think about one, you think about your own. I was now in charge of 30 families or so, and I had to make sure that all of the stuff that was needed to be disseminated was. So that was tricky. And back then, this was in the 90s. We still had multiple other responsibilities. I was also the assistant basketball coach.
Oh my goodness.
I also was home game administrator for fall games, right? So like you didn't even think about how crazy it was back then because you just did it. But now, like if you ask someone to do that now, they're like, wait a minute, how are we going to do all that? But you just woke up and you checked the list and said, okay, I've got these 10 things to do today. Let's do them.
And then the other thing I thought you were alluding to, which is also the communication and all this work, like now we take computers and emails and group me's and all these communication things for granted. Back then, like I guess we used phone trees. Like, all right, if practice is canceled, I'll call you, you call him, you call him, right? Yeah.
You had that whole phone sort of thing. Now I can just text, 40 people in seconds. Back then, I didn't get my first computer till like 3 or 4 years in to coaching. So you're right. We were, we had a bunch of 3-ring binders and a bunch of, phone calls to make. That's kind of how recruiting was too. I mean, we still do that a little bit, but now the amount of information that we're able to give in such a short period of time has really made things a little easier.
All right. So let's transition to this. You've now been at Kenyon as the head coach for like 1,000, 2,000 years at this point.
I think we're moving in on 1,000.
Yeah. 20. All right. So this is what I know about Kenyon never having stepped foot on campus. I know it's a tremendously beautiful school, often ranked as one of the most beautiful schools in the country. It's a high academic, really good liberal arts school. I obviously, before I hit record button, we talked about Tyler Kavanaugh, who I coach with at Sacred Heart, who's now the associate head coach at GW. I know he played there. He raved about it. He raved about you. But for people that don't know much about Kenyon, talk obviously about the university itself. Talk about Kenyon, Kenyon College.
Yeah, I think you hit on a lot of really good points there. It is one of those spectacular sort of visual places. When you step foot on campus, it's kind of breathtaking, to be honest with you. I think I probably take it for granted now being there as long as I've been. But when recruits come on campus or just anybody comes, the parents come for parents weekend or whatever it might be, you just see a lot of the wow. There's a lot of wow factor to how it looks. That's also just the stunning sort of visual, but also the architecture and the buildings and all of the things that go into turf fields. From A to Z, Kenyon cares about its people. So you definitely see that. And it is a really prestigious academic school. liberal arts. So, we don't have everything that maybe someone desires to study. But if we do have it, it's done at the highest level possible. And it's setting people up for, whatever comes next, whether that's grad school, the workforce, whatever it might be. I think the preparation that Kenyon gives you really puts you in a great space for whatever comes next.
Yeah.
And the baseball, I think, falls in line with that, Wayne, to be honest with you. We're just an extension of the college and trying. I've always said no one wants to be mediocre at anything.
That's right.
So I think Kenyon from the top down really takes the mantra of we're trying to do everything we possibly can within our means to be great at whatever it is.
So on the baseball front, and I'm very curious of what you're going to say of this. You have a breadth of experience that most people don't have with the time that you've been there. Has the baseball gotten way better that I'm assuming, or was it really good way back when also? Like, I think your average high school athlete, baseball player, and parent has no earthly clue how good Division III baseball is. I think they don't get it. But from your perspective, has it gotten better, or has it always been really good?
Yeah, it's always been really good. I do think the players that are coming in are more prepared at some level, probably more strength and conditioning,
Good
more
point.
than anything else. But I will tell you, back when I first visited the College of Worcester, as a really good high school player, I walked onto the campus and I said, "Wow, these guys are talented."
Right.
They were big, they were talented, they were winning a bunch of games. So I was taken aback a little bit because you just didn't know.
Yeah.
And I think while more people know about Division III baseball, I still think there is a little bit of shock and awe when the first year guy goes into the box for the first time in the fall, and there's a 22-year-old pitcher who now can throw it where he wants to, can throw it with some velocity, and
Right.
has a breaking ball maybe they haven't seen all the time. So I do think that while the young players are coming into our program probably more prepared than ever in terms of strength and conditioning, I do still think that there is a little bit of a shock factor of, wow, there are really, really good baseball players up and down. Every program, whether it's, you know, the Division III best or it's Division III that, may not be considered one of the best programs. I think there's really good players all over. Um,
Yeah.
I think there's more of them too. I think that's where it may be a little bit different. Back in the day, I think the best players in Division III would still be the best players now. There are
Right.
just more of
It's
them
a great
now.
point. That's a great point.
I just think there's just more out there. There's more exposure, and kids are finding out, how hard it is, and they're prepared a little bit sooner than maybe we were back in the day.
So let me ask you this also, and I'm assuming you're going to kind of agree with me. Now having the 10,000-foot perspective, I'm out of coaching. I don't plan on coaching again, and I deal with all coaches at all levels.
Mhm.
I see a lot of Division I coaches pretty stressed out. Like the job, whether it's pressure to win, whether it's the amount of time working. Division III seems to be the happiest dudes. Like
Yeah.
they seem. So
Yeah.
do you feel that? Do you feel you have a good balance of, hey, I'm getting, from your perspective, my baseball fix. The kids are getting the baseball fix, but at the same time, could actually do other things on campus, academic, social, and art. So like baseball's 90% of their experience in college.
Yeah. I especially think that of like the Division I coaches who aren't breaking the bank.
Right.
Those guys who are
That's a good point.
still working, you know, at a livable wage, but certainly not getting rich doing it. I mean, it's a 24/7, 365 job. It is for us too, but different. I'm thinking about our baseball team every day, but those guys are actually living it every day. I think at that level, there's a work-life balance at Division III that I do think is applaudable.
Yeah.
They really, I really think that the kids also, they love baseball, but these are well-rounded kids who, I think have an idea that, like, it isn't a hobby, it's a passion, but they're also going to do something different when it's all said and done.
Right.
And because of that, yeah, we absolutely have to let them be involved in a lot of different things. So it's not 24/7 baseball. I've had a lot of former assistant coaches go to the Division I ranks, and a lot of them are like, "When can I get that head coaching job at D3?"
It's a very good point.
When can I get that? Because I do think there is, um, in this world where guys are getting fired all the time, I think Division III has some perspective. Like I don't worry day to day about my job security, um,
Totally.
and the win losses. I feel like it's more than that, but the pressure is certainly still on,
Yes. Yeah.
because of what I see in the mirror. Like I
Right.
that guy that I see in the mirror wants to win all the games. So there it's different. There's some similarities to it, but surely at that level, the rat race of 24/7, 365 is real, and being out of a job is real.
Yeah. Yeah.
I see that there's a lot of stress with what happens if it goes south.
And do you, in that capacity you just described too, are like, I remember I did one of these with Mike Leonard from Middlebury, and he talked about, hey, I get involved in other things on campus. Like
Yeah.
do you have that opportunity to do other things or interact with other people besides baseball?
Yeah, in fact, I think it's, an expectation, when you work at these places, right? We're involved depending on, what your likes are and what
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
your passions are. But whether it's working in game administration or being around, other student athletes, whether it's, going to your own student athletes, all the things they do academically, whether it's, you go to a seminar to see what they're presenting, or maybe they're in some sort of production that you go and watch. I always tell this story when we talk about it. I had two kids years ago that were both in the a cappella singing group. They were our 3 and 4 hole hitter, and they had this amazing performance on a Friday night. And we had scheduled the bus to leave Friday night to go to a road trip, that we were playing the next morning. And they were like, "Coach, like I've got to sing Friday night, and we're not going to be done till 10." And I remember saying, "Well, the bus will drive up to wherever you're singing. All of us are going to get out and come watch your performance. And when you guys are done, you're going to jump on the bus and we're going to drive to Allegheny or Meadville, Pennsylvania to play Allegheny in the morning. Like you got to do what you got to do, and we've got to make it palatable. We got to be amenable to what you're trying to do." So yeah, that stuff happens all the time.
That's really cool. It's also helpful that they're the 3 and 4 hitters. So
Yeah, right.
right.
Sure. We don't have to go too deep into that, but yeah, absolutely. That's definitely. We were going to wait for them no matter when.
Right.
Yeah.
Could be a tough open-ended question, but how do you wrap your head around each recruiting class? I mean, between the emails you get, the camps you attend, the amount of tournaments and stuff there are, like organizing the whole thing. Is it, do you have it down now, or is it still a little bit overwhelming?
Yeah, it's still overwhelming at some
Yeah.
level. I think right now is the most overwhelming, simply because when you're acquiring the names and you're sort of really getting involved in the talent and watching them play, it's kind of that's the fun part. You're like, oh
Right.
wow, I could see that guy playing first base for me, or I could see that guy pitching. Well, then you get some yeses, and the class starts to take shape. Now that we're probably 25 emails a day of kids who are still passionate about it, but we just don't have the space for them.
Right.
And so that I mean, it's a little disheartening, at some level, because you'd love to have a home for every kid who wants to play. But you only have so many uniforms, and ultimately, if you get too many players, there's going to be disgruntled players. And so you have to really be cognizant of, who you're offering, how many spots you're offering, and that. I think that's the daunting piece of this. Because when you're a really good school, a lot of people want to go there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and at the top of the top, when you're talking about the best 10% of who's going to play at Division III, those kids have so many options.
Right.
And ultimately, yeah, you spend a lot of time chasing maybe a group that isn't going to show up. They're going to go somewhere else.
Right.
And then you got to have plan B and plan C, and plan B and plan C are still plan A players,
Right.
but they they can't all be plan A at the very
Can't.
beginning.
Right.
So yeah, it can be a little overwhelming. I think I'm better at it now than I've ever been, but ultimately when you're selling a product like I'm selling, Kenyon College, I mean, the list is long. People
Yeah.
really want to be a part of it. But Wayne, there's a lot of things I tell kids, like the academic and the athletic fit is a real thing. And it's not just about us feeling they're good enough academically and they're good enough to play for us. It also is Kenyon good enough for them
Right.
academically and athletically, and is the fit right? So I always say that this time of year is probably the most overwhelming, but in about 3 weeks, like it gets really quiet because
Right.
everything's pretty much finished, and then you're transitioning to the next group.
Yeah, this is something that obviously is not going to happen just because you and I talk about it, but I feel like more colleges need to start D3 baseball programs. I mean, the amount of kids that are getting to, like you said, you can only have so many kids on your
Right.
roster, and there are viable good players
Yes.
that kind of don't have a home. Like, and
Yeah.
obviously that, the Division I roster thing trickles down, and boy,
Yeah.
like, I don't know whether it's like maybe a Division IV. Like, I'm not kidding when I say
Yeah. No.
there needs to be more opportunities. And I'm sure if we're talking about this in baseball, basketball coaches, soccer coaches, lacrosse, other coaches have to be talking about that. That's the part of the job probably stinks, is to get this good kid, good grades,
Yeah.
and go, I don't have any room for you anymore.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, if there was somebody we didn't have any idea about and he just out of the blue contacted us today, like, I don't know that we could entertain it. I mean,
Right.
it's just it would be hard to do, considering that we start recruiting at least 10 months to a year ahead of time, and in some instances even before that.
Right.
So yeah, I do think it can be a daunting task to find your recruiting class, but there's so many kids that have access to playing now. um, and there's a tournament, it seems like every day of the summer or the year. Things are still going on right now. People were asking the other day, are you going to Arizona? I'm like, no.
Right.
I've got my own team now. We're doing fall ball. I can't get to Arizona, but ultimately, you might be onto something. I think Division IV probably could support it.
It actually, I think it could.
There's
Yes.
plenty of kids out there who probably have to put away the spikes because there just isn't room for them in its current state.
Yeah. And then I don't want to, this is not really a question, just a comment, which is, I see certainly at the big schools, the club ball is pretty darn competitive now too at some of
Yes.
these big schools too, because just what we talked about. But kind of another open-ended question: what would you? Because obviously this is what I know about you. You're just a very nice guy, but that's me knowing you as a friend and fellow. What's Matt Burdette like as a coach? Are you a player's coach? Is there, it's a tough question. What would
Yeah.
you say your coaching style is?
Well, I think I've evolved, through the years. I think, early in my infancy of coaching, I think I was more about Matt Burdette than I was about anything else. Just because I wanted to prove to myself that I could do it. Now that I think I've crossed that hurdle. Now I'm way more about the student athletes and the families, and trying to make this experience the best that it can be, knowing full well that not everybody's going to get the experience they envision.
Right.
It's just not possible to
It's not
have
possible.
everybody, have the dream scenario in their college life play out on the field. So I'm cognizant of that. I think I am a player's coach. And I'll say one thing that I tell the guys all the time: the most respectful thing I can do for a player is be honest.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell them whether the words coming out of my mouth are what they want to hear or not. They're going to come from a place of caring, and it's going to be honest. So if they're not getting it done, and I have to tell them that, listen, I need you to do this and this in order for you to get more of a look, I've got to be able to tell them that, because I think too many times, maybe when I was younger, it's like, no, everything's great, you're doing great. And then the next piece was, well, if I'm doing so great, why don't you ever put my name in the lineup?
Great point.
And the thought process was, I was just trying to make them happy, when in fact I was making them miserable.
Wow,
So now,
that's well said, Matt. Really well said.
and now I'm not worried about making them miserable because I'm trying to really make them happy.
Right.
So again, it's sort of flipped in the evolution of my coaching.
Yeah, that's interesting. And you brought up something I used to think about when I was coaching as a pitching guy. I mean, I would have sometimes up to 22 pitchers, certainly
Yep.
20 or 18. And I remember this distinctly, winning a game and being so happy for like the two or three pitchers that pitched
Right.
well. And then as you're wrapping up, you see three pitchers who thought they were going to get in, very
Yeah.
pissed off, like,
Yeah, for sure.
yeah.
Right.
And then I
Yep.
remember like going to deal with that. Like,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
no matter kind of how you run it, right, in the world of baseball with the rosters, the way they're, and I even think about watching the Major League Baseball playoffs, like their roster is way smaller than any college roster.
No
Of
question.
course, because they could go to the minor leagues. You don't have a minor leagues in college, so you
Right.
have to keep a bigger roster. But that sometimes can lead to kids being frustrated. So it's not an easy position to be in.
Yeah, we don't have minor league schedules.
Right.
we have the minor leaguers, for lack of a better term, but we don't really have opportunities for them to go out and play other teams. We don't have a JV team at Kenyon, and there just aren't that many anyway. You're not
Right.
going to have them miss a bunch of class and spend a bunch of money to have a JV schedule. So it's a difficult, it's really a fine line between the ones who get to go out there and have the joy of playing in the games, and then looking around going, wow, we had like 25 guys who didn't play at all.
Right.
And while the name on the front of the jersey is always more important than the name on the back, human nature says, like, if I didn't play, how vital was I to today's win?
Right.
So again, a lot of things that maybe young coaches don't think about that old coaches
right.
have seen
Yeah.
time and time and time again.
A couple more things. One is, I assume it doesn't impact your day-to-day piece, but when I say transfer portal, yeah, right. What does that mean for Kenyon and Coach Burdette?
Fortunately, it means nothing.
Good. Good to hear.
Because my job is to develop the players that we recruit, not go and find ready-made guys after our development may not have taken hold yet. And the other piece is, I think I'm very fortunate. Kenyon's just not going to give away the degree.
Right.
So,
that's a good point. It's a great point.
To transfer to Kenyon, you better do it early because it's never going to happen late.
Interesting.
Now, transferring out, we haven't had that issue either. Knock on wood. I think, again, when you have a great place and they're getting a great academic experience, even if the baseball isn't perfect, no one's leaving this environment, for the most part. Sure, there's one or two here and there, but for the most part, the retention rate is, in the high 90%. And the portal rate for us, honestly, I don't even know how to get on the portal.
Interesting.
So that's
a good thing. Yeah,
that's how it just isn't working. Now, if someone called me, and it made sense, sure, we've had transfers come in, but it's not the way you would think. We're not getting pinged on our phone every time someone enters the portal, which I've heard that story where, like, you can be pinged when someone enters the portal. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know how I would survive.
Yeah.
And I think that just sort of circles back to that Division I sort of mentality where, like, it's you've got to chase every lead because you just never know.
Yeah, I mean, for most Division I coaches, that first month when their spring season is over, forget high school kids. It's seeing who's coming, who's going, and how do they replace it, which is understandable. That's the business model now that they have to deal with. I certainly don't want you to talk about this player unless you want to, but I never ask a coach to talk about the player. But my last podcast was Chris Pollard, the head coach at University of Virginia, who I had talked about his younger son who had just committed to Gardner-Webb. And then, of course, he said his older son plays for you. In any way, is that interesting? I mean, this is a pretty legendary, really qualified coach. Of course, you are too. But do you ever go in the back of your head, hey, I better be running stuff right? He's going to go back to dad and tell him I don't know what the hell I'm doing.
Yeah, that's great. I will tell you that the Pollards are about as supportive a family as I've ever run into in my entire coaching career.
Wow.
Chris is a tremendous guy. Um, the whole family, Steph, Brady, Tommy, they're all tremendous. I've had just incredible interactions with all of them every time I see them. So yeah, I mean, there's always part of it, like, if a hit and run goes awry and maybe he's there watching,
Right, right.
but at the end of the day, we've had great conversations, and it rarely revolves around baseball, about
Mm,
strategy or anything like that.
right,
It's
right,
more
right,
about our families, and just his transition this year to Virginia,
right,
which which I can only imagine was difficult, at best.
right.
Great opportunity, obviously, but invested all that time at Duke and now at Virginia. So yeah, I mean, they're great, and Tommy's great. Tommy is like having another coach.
Mm,
I talk to him, a lot of just about life and playing baseball. And he also works in our athletic administration. He runs one of the clocks in the press box for football. So like we have another whole, you know, a whole nother thing to talk about when we
right, right, right.
so yeah, they're great. I'm so thankful that they're a part of the program.
That's really cool. All right, my last question then is, I had kind of said before we started, I'm really happy that Mohegan Sun sponsors the podcast. This is an event takes place in Connecticut. I've been to 20 plus years, and I'm sure you've been to conventions in there, whether you're presenting or learning or just talking baseball. It's a really great thing. So with that in mind, I'll ask you, which putting you on the spot, what would you tell either, high school version of Matt Burdette, or like if you had one or two things to tell a developing high school kid who wants to play college baseball, is there any one or two things you would say that you've learned over the years?
Yeah, be patient. I think, everybody's looking for, you know, the quick fix.
Mm,
If I just get my front foot down earlier, then I'm going to hit line drives all over the place, right? It's a little bit more difficult than that. Um, I think patience. I, I do think that if I would have worked a little bit harder behind the scenes as a 17 and 18-year-old player, like, I don't know what that would have meant. It probably would have meant having a little bit more success, but I do tell everybody, like, the work you do when no one's watching tends to be the work that's the most valuable. And so that's part of it. And I think I was a lone wolf, kind of growing up doing what I was doing. I didn't have a ton of, baseball playing like buddies that I hung around with all the time that were looking at the exact same thing. Um, I do think that playing the other sports was very valuable. So just having more perspective on, I hung around with a lot of wrestlers, and I watched them, do crazy things to make weight and to do whatever. And I was a basketball player, and I had a bunch of football guys. I think, again, just having that perspective. And then lastly, like, your education is way more important than your batting average.
right.
So like, anybody who thinks that sports are going to save their 1.5 GPA, it's probably not going to happen. So really, really dig deep. You can do both at a very high level. I tell our guys all the time, we're going to win a bunch of games and we're going to do really well in the classroom, and we can't make excuses for either one.
Yeah.
So
And
that's
yeah,
kind of it.
I like that. And I really do. It does resonate with the be patient, I think,
Yeah.
especially in, the world that these kids have grown up in, where things have come quicker. Right. It is being patient it's not easy,
Yeah.
but if you are patient and you have your good habits, you really can develop, and you really can get what you want if you're able to be patient with it. That's no one has said that before, and I think it's a really good one. So all right, coach, this was awesome. I'm so glad that you made time and we connected, and this is great. I think people are going to get a whole lot of this. So thank you for joining me.
Great. Thanks, Wayne. I appreciate you.
You
Have a
got it,
great one,
buddy.
buddy.
All right. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the Game Plan Podcast by College Baseball Advisors. Again, this is Wayne Mazzoni, owner of College Baseball Advisors. For more information about what I do, visit collegebaseballadvisor.com. Again, I hope you enjoyed today's episode with Matt Burdette. head baseball coach at Kenyon College, and look forward to seeing you on our next event. Next podcast just scheduled now is Steve Trimper, head baseball coach at Stetson University in Florida. I'd like to remind you that this podcast is made possible through the sponsorship of the World Baseball Coaches Convention. Takes place every year in January at the Mohegan Sun Casino. This year is January 15th to 17th. That's Thursday through Saturday at the Mohegan Sun Arena and within the casino. It's a great event with coaches from high school coaches, local and national college coaches, minor league coaches, professional coaches, players. It's a really awesome event. There's vendors. Coaches can buy things that they need for the season at discounted prices. There's live demos. It's just an awesome event to network, kind of recharge your batteries. For more information about what they do and to register, please visit baseballcoachesclinic.com. Thank you so much, and see you on our next episode.